Addiction to gambling is often called a silent disease and is an easy trap to fall into in Illinois. The state brought in more than $2.6 billion in gambling tax revenues last year to help balance its budget. But that's only about a third of the almost $8 billion that Illinoisans lost from gambling at casinos, playing regulated slot machines, betting on sports, and buying lottery tickets. The state dedicates less than 0.1% of the money generated by gambling back to treating the addiction it causes. For every $100 the state collected from gambling last year, it devoted less than 5 cents to treatment. The state assessed problem gambling during the pandemic when sports gambling had yet to be fully implemented, estimating 383,000 Illinois adults to have a gambling problem. Pritzker's Department of Human Services plans to publish a second assessment in 2027, with plans to do so every 5 years.